Hello and welcome back to Specially Speaking. I'm Andrea,
And I'm Liz.
and this is the podcast where we tackle big educational topics without putting you to sleep faster than a Friday afternoon professional development session. Today's hot topic is homeschooling. That's right, dust off your dry erase boards and break out that color-coded planner that you have. Or let's be real, probably a stack of snacks and a prayer to get through the rest of this week. We're going to dive into why is homeschooling having its big main character moment right now. Well, between questionable government decisions and the emotional roller coaster that is the modern school environment, more families are saying, you know what? We're just going to take it from here. Goodbye drop off lines, that very weird random cafeteria mystery meat, and hello to pajama math and science in the backyard.
No more tater
No
tots.
more taters. Now, full disclosure, obviously, I'm an educator, Liz is an educator, and I've seen some things, the good, the bad, the probably shouldn't talk about that in public sides of schooling. And Liz has worked with families who've taken that actual leap into homeschooling, not because it's easy, but because it offers something schools often can't, which is flexibility, personalization, and the way fewer, way fewer middle of the night stomach bugs, which I'm sure if you are a parent, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So, buckle up. Today, we're diving into what homeschooling really looks like, what's fueling its rise, and why it might just be the best thing since that one snow day that turned into a 4-day weekend. With that being said, it is all yours, my friend.
That sounds so inviting when you're talking about homeschooling. And yes, it is different per state. So we're going to dive right into it. But homeschooling is just going to be another option on the table for education, families, educators, future teachers. And so there are different reasons why it's gaining popularity. And I think a lot of people are looking into, well, I know a lot of people are looking into alternative education outside of the brick and mortar for different reasons. And throughout this week, I've had the opportunity to speak with many of my parents. So just to give a little background, I am currently a special education specialist and a consultant for homeschooling students in the state of Utah.
Far, far away from our sweet home, New Jersey.
Right. Well, if there's anything that COVID taught us was that remote learning could be effective. But a lot of my students, for the most part, the majority of my students, the reason why I'm educating them from the state of New Jersey is in the state of Utah, and like I preferenced before, every state has different mandates for homeschooling. But in the state of Utah, parents have the option of having an educator within special education, within the special education field to support them with lessons, strategies, instructions, and really following the goals that are implemented in the IEP. So I work with a lot of those families, and I got to say, there was another skeptical thought in my mind prior to working there. Does homeschooling work? What does that look like for students with specific strategies, special needs? Are they able to get on remote learning and navigate through most of the technology programs that I utilize with my students? But saying all that,
I will say, I am more on the skeptical side of this because it's also even from working remote when we were on COVID, I saw some things that worked and some things that I'm not so sure about it. So
yeah, I think what made me comfortable was when COVID had occurred. At the time, I was a supervisor for a school with multiply disabled students. So thinking about those challenges and how we're educating them remotely was really gave me experience and the sense of belief that, hey, this can work. Some students take to the individualism of remote learning and some students don't. But before we dive into that, there are different reasons. As you mentioned in your opening, governmental change and action.
Wish the soundboard worked, but we seem to not be friends. Me and Liz are going to have to do the sound effects because truly, honestly, they are needed when we talk anything about the government as of late.
Sure. And the reason why I mention that is because when you're talking about homeschooling, right, we're talking about what is the financial aspect to homeschooling, right? So through government actions, there are many funding scholarship programs, and it's per state, but each state gets allocated a certain amount of funds for homeschooling. Now, again, the way that they're dispersed may be different according to state laws, but there are governmental actions that had occurred per state that make parents feel maybe not so much, whether it's the curriculum standards, the type of curriculum that's being implemented in the school systems. So with that being said, an additional challenge, a lot of parents are pulling away back from traditional schooling, from the traditional environment, whether that's because it might be overstimulating for their child, or their child has extreme difficulties being in a larger whole group setting to absorb the information and apply it. Parents are looking for different academic instructions other than what the curricula that's being utilized in the district. Another reason for homeschooling, social emotional challenges and changes within the student population. And unfortunately, I would say about a large portion of my parents that I work with pulled their child out with special needs because they felt like they were getting bullied, or they felt like the program that was being implemented wasn't on the correct pace for their child, or the team that's implementing all of the accommodations and modifications of the IEP is probably not knowledgeable enough, or just not doing them enough. But the social emotional challenges, right? Let's give an example. We worked at a high school in an urban school district, right?
Yeah.
And I always told you back when I started working about 17, 18 years ago, my profession was just to modify academic instructions. I morphed over, or let's just say evolved over, to working with kids and focusing on their social emotional challenges before their academics. So a lot of parents saw how that was challenging in itself for their child to go to school, let alone sit there, concentrate, and excel in academics.
I think when we're talking about, especially special education, I think you need to have both in balance. Like, you can't just have the over like emphasis on the educational component and not take into the social emotional, because for a lot of those kids, the best way they learn is with that social emotional groundwork done first, because then it's easier to work with them on the educational academic front. So
for sure. And I was doing 504s just for anxiety, depression, right? All of those social emotional challenges that will arise,
which I think we've seen even more of since COVID. Like, that's been on the rise of more and more, even IEPs, 504s with those classifications included in them. So it's not just like, even like Liz said, a lot of her clients, it's not just focusing on just the academics, but also on their child's social emotional growth that they take into consideration.
And parents want to really emphasize the desire to provide moral instruction. So if we're in the middle of academic instruction, and this occurs all the time, and let's just say a task avoidance behavior just becomes overwhelming for myself or the parents at the time, we're going to focus on that. We have the time to focus on that because of the individualism that can occur with homeschooling remotely. Now, let me preference by saying this is not, there are different ways of what homeschooling could look like. This is just, I'm giving you an example of when they utilize outside services to support what they're doing in the classroom, right? So it's no different than if I was an OT coming into a home or a PT. I'm just really focusing on the academic instruction of it because of the IEP and coaching. Coaching is really big, and that's why parents really like the homeschooling. But there are different types of, reasoning and ways that can occur. The different types of homeschooling, I will say, because I just gave you an example of what I'm doing, is hybrid. Where the parents still do some of the academic instructions like the sciences, the social studies, and I focus on the goals. There's homeschooling with, it's just 100% parent led, right? The parents are reporting to the state. They know what online curricula they need to utilize. And I will say that some states don't even require you to have a certain curriculum or utilize a certain curriculum. So there's a openness about that. and virtual courses. So some of my students who are older students in high school will see me for their IEP goals, and then they see another teacher for their
actual academic
yeah, right,
classes.
because they still need to meet the high school graduation qualifications.
And now I would assume, along with the virtual like courses, there are programs for like pure just online schooling as a whole, and not just like one-off courses that, like, let's say an older
Yes.
student might need, because you might not need another year of math if you've already done X, Y, depending on what your state requires, right? So as you get older, like, obviously there are classes that you can probably exclude and not have to take any longer. But for younger students, I'm sure there are tons of
Yeah.
options for just
There's a lot of options. There's a lot of programs that coincide with supporting homeschooling education, and even the social aspect of homeschooling. So to pull away from traditional schooling, homeschooling requires more flexibility in scheduling. If a student wants to focus in one particular area earlier than a high school level, they're able to do that with programs. Traditional schools follow a standardized curriculum, where homeschooling, again, this is per state. And we're going to show you how you can find out what qualifications, what legal qualifications your state will allow for homeschooling.
And I will say, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I will say, though, if you are also very, very curious, you can ask ChatGPT, just to segue back to our last episode. You can ask ChatGPT to actually give you all of the options for your state. She will happily compile a nice long list, give you links for whatever you may need. Just make sure you say please and thank you afterwards. And now back to you about homeschooling.
I'm just saying, overall, homeschooling is for individual experiences rather than a whole group setting. And I think that the environment sometimes really supports the progressiveness that you need within, especially if you're aligning all of your lessons to the IEP, right? I think even for the educator, monitoring the student's progression or even regression, right? You can really hone in and focus on that one particular area because they're not lost in a group of other students. And you have the opportunity and the time to work on that particular subject matter or content, right? And I always tell my students, you run the pace of the lesson, of the content. As long as I get to the goal, it's your pace. If we need to do one particular lesson 10 times, then so be it. Where in a traditional school setting, you really don't have that opportunity unless you get push in or pull out services.
Even then, like, it's still on a much quicker timeline because you have to, like with push in and pull out, you still have to work at the pace of the teacher in the classroom. So if the teacher in the classroom is already moving on to something else, like, you can do a remedial lesson in your pull out, but you still have to be able to get those kids pushing and moving along to the next area of whatever they're doing in the class, because you can't let them fall too far behind, because that's also going to create a larger gap then.
Yeah. And then you have a whole
other rabbit hole that we will probably talk about in another episode.
But homeschooling is really for everybody. It's for students with special needs. It's for students who are gifted. There are a lot of programs that will be in conjunction with homeschooling for gifted and talented. For those parents who are like, well, I can't homeschool because I want them in this particular program, or they're utilizing this particular program. There are a lot of professionals out there that teach gifted and talented, that teach ELL, online, remote. So you can have those programs still doing homeschooling. There's just specific guidelines. With everything else, you follow the instructions.
I think sometimes we kind of forget about the gifted learners. Because really, I can say for myself, I have not come across any students in my almost 10 years of experience where I would say that they were well beyond the grade level they were in. So I think that as educators, sometimes we kind of forget that that is actually a thing, where there are students who are so far beyond the pace of the instruction in the classroom, and then what can we do to actually help them? And this is a great tool, a great thing to utilize for families to help their gifted learners.
Right. And I'm going to keep preferencing and saying it's state by state.
Yes.
And I'll give you an example. In the state of New Jersey, you can do homeschooling. You know, you go to the Department of Education. There is guidelines and instructions for you to follow. And if you need to send in any information, there's direct instructions and contact information that you can go right ahead and do so. But for the most part, in the state of New Jersey, how they utilize homeschooling is if it's a long-term suspension over 10 days,
Mhm.
if they're waiting for transition to another out-of-district placement, and or if they are ill or had any
Yeah,
major
some sort of
surgeries, right?
medical, yeah.
Right. Where in the state of Utah, you are allowed to have that as your 100% academic. You don't have to do anything specifically other than disenroll. Well, you always have to disenroll
Yeah.
your student. But let's just say when you disenroll a student in New Jersey, you have to go through the Board of Education. You have to fill out an application. It has to be approved. And there has to be significant reasoning as to why you're doing that. Where in the state of Utah, you just disenroll your child, and then the parents will do the research really to
Yeah.
find out what programs are more suitable for them to utilize with their child, and or the hybrid program where we are hired from a district who will still support financially through grants. Now, we don't know what that's going to look like down the line, but financially through grants, through federal grants, the districts will get a certain amount of money for the number of homeschooling that they have previously seen or
Yeah.
projected to see, because homeschooling is really big in the state of Utah for a lot of different reasons,
Yeah.
which we've already said for the flexibility schedule.
Yeah.
There are a lot of large families
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
in
Especially
Utah.
in Utah.
Yeah. For religious purposes,
Yeah.
right? Academic and learning style considerations. I know my child. I know what my child needs to
Yeah.
progress. So I think this is going to be the best. Now, a lot of our parents, I will say, will trial it for a year or two. I've had students who trialed it for a year and went back into traditional schooling because there was comparable data that we were able to review and say, hey, this might be the best situation for your
Yeah.
child's learning progression, or this might be the best situation. But you get the opportunity to have those conversations with the parents without seeing a line of parents because it's back to school night and you really want to spend 10 minutes with the parents, but you really can't
Yeah.
because you have so many other parents. If you're fortunate to have all those parents come in for back to school night.
Really depends, because I'll say in my experience, nobody shows up, and then it's a ghost town for hours.
But there are many reasons. And again, religious, philosophical reasons, or just concern. In interviewing some of my parents, the number one area that was very common is they were concerned for the safety and well-being of their child. Now, that's not to any fault of the districts,
Yeah.
but overcrowdedness was a really big thing. How is my child going to be able to focus in a classroom of 25 and 30 kids? The teacher, what is the teacher support,
Yeah.
right?
I think even then you've got classes, like thinking about Jersey, like 35 strong, sometimes more, which is not really a
And is that
healthy
going
learning
to
environment.
increase, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then I think too, like with the rise of, especially with kids now, right, with the rise of access to different social medias and things like that, like I can completely understand why a parent might like want to navigate out of that sort of
Right.
environment and bring their
Yeah.
child into a calmer, more, what's the word I'm looking for? Not conducive, like more, I don't know, just an environment where learning
It's a
is
more holistic
yeah,
approach.
yeah.
Right? I think a lot of kids really stem off the fact that they're able to have that holistic learning
Yeah.
opportunity, right? Because it gives them the opportunity. Interviewing some of my students, they like the opportunity to have engagement.
Yeah.
They like the opportunity to look into their teacher's eyes, to try to especially for some of my kiddos who have a challenging time communicating, just
Yeah.
like I am right now. Right?
Yeah.
You have, it's just like what we spoke in our last episode. You have tone. You have, the person's facial expression. That creates another level of understanding for most of our students that you're not going to get in a classroom that has behaviors in the corner or somebody on the phone or two teachers, because sometimes there's two teachers in the classroom.
Yeah.
Or a teacher that has a thick accent and I don't know why I'm failing because I don't understand what's going.
Yeah.
So there's all those different factors, and I'm not pinpointing any one particular major reasoning for it, but these are just some of the reasons that the parents are concerned about when they put their child into brick and mortar education.
But then, okay, I have a question for you. What do we do about a student's socialization skills? Because yes, on video, right, you hear my tone, you could see my facial expressions. Those are things that like a student obviously can still pick up on and learn from, but they're not with other people their age. So, and they're not around children. So what can a parent do then if they want to go the homeschool route? Like, what can they do? Because if I'm thinking about my 4-year-old, like socialization is a very big part of her growth. And if I were to just completely be like, nope, you're going to be home with mommy. I mean, granted, she would love to be home with mommy every single day. So we're not going to do the homeschool thing right now. She would be through the moon to be with me, but she would no longer have any socialization with kids her own age. So developmentally, like that wouldn't be the greatest. So what could families possibly do then?
Well, there are plenty of social interactions, yeah, club that coincide. Once they find, oh, it's so cool. Once the state finds out that you're going to go the homeschooling route,
Okay.
just like anything else, when you research on your cell phone and all these things pop
ChatGPT.
up, she's such a fan. We got to get t-shirts. But all these things pop up. That's the same thing, right? When you're looking for like a car loan, student loan or whatnot, and you put in your information and then you get all, or car insurance, you get all this, the same thing happens.
So like an autofax for
Exactly. And there are a lot of social groups on the internet. Social media has a lot of that. So there's this cool group where you can just go on. It's homeschooling. It's a homeschooling parent community on Facebook, and you just tell them what state you're in, and they give you all of the resources to find. So there are plenty of opportunities. There are play groups. A lot of my homeschooling parents know each other because they have play groups. It could be age appropriate, sport appropriate. Like if they're interested in particular sports, they can play and participate in sports within their districts. So if they want to do that whole group learning activity within sports or clubs, they're able to do so. Definitely, you're still able to do so and be a part of your district and your community with those. So there are a lot of co-ops, a lot of science co-ops. So it's very hands-on. A lot of parents were concerned about, well, what about the lab work for biology? Co-ops. Have those specialized programs. Well, they'll have those science teachers in a particular, some schools even open up their after school time for such co-ops. Yeah, it's really amazing, the homeschooling community, and how, well, really any community, when you're focused on one particular area, especially in education, what you have to go do is go to Facebook and you'll see all these parent groups, student groups, co-op groups. There's so many opportunities, and there are homeschooling fairs that always happen. They are informational fairs, just like they do for educators, right? There are informational fairs for homeschooling families that have sports, co-ops, science clubs, even debate clubs, chess clubs. And you can do that remotely, or you can do that in person within your state and community. So there are a lot of options, especially in music and art. And you also get discounts. Some states have scholarships where they'll give for the year. Let's say a family will receive $11,000. And within that $11,000, you can buy curriculum. You can buy instruments. You can buy music and art programs. So if the co-op is not free, majority of the time they are, you have funding. Again, this is per state, and I'm giving you an example of Utah because Utah has many scholarship programs that our company is a part of, and we become a vendor. And so the parents have a plethora of resources and vendors that they can choose to fill in those gaps, those scheduling gaps, right? The scheduling gaps.
Give your kids something to do during the free time that they have. But that's great though. And I'm sure if you don't like Facebook, I'm sure that some of these groups probably also exist on Instagram. I know
Instagram and LinkedIn.
I know I'm in LinkedIn.
Yeah, they have groups
on LinkedIn.
Because there are
that later. I gotta fact check that one.
Don't fact check. I work in the industry. If I'm looking for a particular vendor and I see their vendor and their links, some vendors are connected to groups and they will post their groups and put hyperlinks.
See, I don't use my LinkedIn that much for things like of this nature. I use it for job stuff. I don't really sit on there to go. I mean, I know there are people who go on LinkedIn to socialize like it's Facebook, but that's not me. For me.
And I fell on that by chance because I was trying to figure out LinkedIn. I didn't know I had
across a bunch of groups.
Forgot that many years ago I created an account, and then I did it, and then I saw some vendors' names on it, and I was like, hey, let me go and be nosy.
Let me go be nosy.
But because I was nosy, I was able to get LinkedIn to every other
Yeah,
co-op
vendor.
group
Yeah.
that they belong to, because everybody puts
Yeah.
a lot of information in that.
All right, well, that's good to know. I'm still gonna look into it later because the sheer fact that we're using LinkedIn like it's a Facebook page now is really just tickling me in such a way.
Yeah, a lot of people use other, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a whole side.
But I want to show them, because I keep mentioning that the
legal
laws
stuff?
are state by state by state. I want to show you a way how you can look up the laws in your particular state by just clicking on a map. So we're going to share our screen. Again, homeschooling laws vary greatly from state to state. Some states have minimal requirements, while others require detailed reporting and assessments. So if we click on the state of New Jersey, this is the New Jersey laws. So
Yeah.
if you go up and you look at there you go. It's the
Advocates for homeschooling. Will all of the links for the things like this map and the other page that we're likely going to show you will link in the description box. Haha, I remembered this episode, what it's called. We'll see by the end of the episode if I do. But we'll link it in the description box so you guys have access to it so that you can, if you want to like peruse, if you're, just curious, or maybe now after, well, we concluded the podcast, you're like, hell yeah, homeschooling. Screw school buildings.
As Andrea plays with it and just clicks on a state.
Any state? I get to choose any state. Why is this in red? I'm curious. I'm clicking on.
Well, they're the colors. There's
high regulation. Oh, that's what it is.
So there are particular states, like I said, in some states, parents must register with the local school district and submit periodic reports. Some states may right, and they may require you to have a specific curriculum be approved by the state standards. So again, for you to really hone in on see what particular protocols or requirements are done per state, this is a great website for you to do that. It'll also show you whether there are standardized testing requirements for your child to graduate high school. Some states, like Utah, do not have it. Some states, like New Jersey, you got to take a standardized test to graduate. And it's also good to know what you're going to be responsible for as a parent when it comes to your child's educational program, right? Are you responsible for grades? Do you have to report on the extracurricular activities? Homeschooling transcripts may be necessary for some higher education applications, right? And the universities are aware, the universities in the states are aware that some of their class will be homeschooling. So they are proficient at knowing what the regulations are for those homeschooling students.
I would assume they would have to, just because it's not like, even looking at this map, right? Like it's not like this isn't something that is countrywide. So like colleges would have to know what to do with that. I'm also looking like I think this is really cool. It's got like what's happening in New Jersey. I was just on the New York one before, but like if you click on states, it'll depending on where you are, right? Like it's gonna give you most of the information on the how to homeschool, regardless of state, is the same. It looks like up here, but like then you've got specific things to your state, so it might be really helpful. Like if you're curious and want to look into it, like obviously like peruse the top for like how to, but like the more important stuff's going to be in the what's happening, so you can kind of really find out, especially with the current climate of our government. Like look, you see on the state house steps, rally for your attorney, just so you can keep track of like what's actually happening in your state, to see if this is also going to be a viable thing, because like Liz has mentioned a couple of times, like there is funding. Every state's a little different on how you can get that funding. There, it does exist.
Get the funding now.
Get it,
before it goes.
Get in before anything else changes. Again, and if you ask, my shameless plug is going to just keep being ChatGPT, but I did this, so that's how I know. If you ask ChatGPT, she will happily tell you what scholarship programs for homeschooling exist, and how to apply for them. She'll give you like the links and like all of that fun junk. So if you want to, like after perusing this and you're like, this might be something I'm interested in, but I need the financial support and assistance to get that done, like definitely look into it. But like Liz said, try to get it in now, because with all of the changes and cuts to funding and things that we're seeing happen now, like the sooner you do it, the better, because we may not have access to it for much longer. Right. We don't know yet.
Right. Or minimal access. But I do want to say that, yes, I had an interview with a parent of a special education parent who was referred to our company just out of curiosity with the homeschooling,
Yeah.
and was concerned because her child has an IEP, is in a good, decent special educational setting, but unfortunately, the family moves quite often. Homeschooling, that's another reason. You're a military baby or you're a military family, they go into homeschooling. But the concern was special education. Special education. Can I just say, and this is my biased opinion, please, I have not done any statistical data regarding this, but I have been in education long enough to know progression. And I will say that, and naturally show my students are progressing. And it's not that they have an awesome teacher, but it's the fact that the environment, the attention, the individualism. We're always taught about differentiation, instruction, and so forth and so forth. How about individual instruction? So effective. What child doesn't want the teacher's attention to answer their questions or give them more clarity? And
There are some who dislike school who would very happily
that's a
rather
whole
sit in the
nother-
back of a classroom and be ignored all day long. So there are some. There are some who'd be like, yes, I'm ignored.
But I just want to say specifically for special education, when you withdraw from a public school, you're no longer entitled to some of those related services
Yeah.
and or state accommodations, like state testing accommodations. You're really saying that I am going to be the sole responsible person for implementing what's in this IEP. Now, a professional can come and do the IEP with you on an annual basis. Again, it really matters on what the state requirements are. But when you disenroll your child with special education, you are saying, I am going to be responsible for implementing everything in this legal document.
Yeah,
I just want to preference by saying that.
Yeah, you basically essentially put on the case manager coordinator hat, where that is now.
Now that is 100% homeschooling with the parents doing it all by themselves.
Yes.
If you're in a hybrid program, that's totally different. They will still honor and support you by giving you a child study team and an educator. Sources for homeschooling, I just want to say spedhomeschool.com.
I could share it. I share it.
Is where you go to learn everything about homeschooling. This is a generalized website that gives you all of the information in deeper details than what we're doing. We're covering the very basics.
Yes.
This really goes into freebies. It goes into
Content
everything.
library. It's got everything. Curriculum help, upcoming teaching tools, support strategies. This is definitely, if you're interested in your child has an IEP, this would definitely be.
It talks about the differences between traditional homeschooling with the structure and teacher-directed approach to the more holistic approach. Yeah. It talks about a child-led approach, learning on their natural curiosities and interests. Now, there are different types of homeschooling education theories and methods. The overall senses regarding homeschooling is based on a classical approach to educate and focus on like grammar, logic, and that's going to be your atypical homeschooling education style. But there's other methods like the Charlotte Mason method, where it emphasizes on short lessons, audiobooks. That's more like what you're going to find in a hybrid program, like with a special education teacher like myself. We do short lessons according to how many times do I have to see with the IEP. So the Charlotte Mason method really goes alongside with the IEPs. It works very nicely together. Then you have like Montessori's. We see all those schools.
Which you wouldn't think a Montessori would be considered like a homeschooling.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it to some respect, but like
the instruction approach is kind of similar, and a lot of our younger students do half day there because the approach is quite similar to homeschooling. It's hands-on, it's art-driven, it just encourages that hands-on experience. Yeah. And really the gist of homeschooling is creating that schedule. So a lot of parents find that it brings on family time.
See how
and they enjoy it because with the hustle and bustle of every day, they still want to keep their child grounded with their their family's values and beliefs, and so they're able to do so at a capacity where they're very hands-on with that.
But I feel like the schedule and routine would have to be like very set and very clear, right? Like if I'm
Precise.
thinking about it as a parent, like I couldn't have my child every day doing something different at different times. Like it'd have to still be almost like, I don't want to say like a traditional school schedule, but you still
Oh, they
have
have
it.
schedules.
Sure they do. But it would still have to be very mapped out so that it
Yeah.
still creates that routine and structure. Because obviously with the flexibility, we love a good flexible day. Like again, as a parent, if my kid's sick or something, or like I'm sick, or like the flexibility is nice to have, but still on for the rest of the time, like having that clear cut schedule is going to make it a lot easier, help you stay organized, help your child stay organized
Yeah.
and stay on task. And like, it gives them almost like, I don't know, it's like something to look forward to, but it's like, okay, if I finish this hour of math, I have whatever, maybe like hands-on
I
activity
have
that,
expectations. I have goals for that day
Yeah.
that keeps me on
on
track.
Yeah.
And the fun part about that is I get to work hands-on with the parents regarding
Yeah.
the scheduling, because I have many students and they have many activities.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest challenge is really the schedule part of it all.
Yeah.
But once you get that down and the student becomes acclimated to that schedule, it is like a school day, right? I have students who on Thursdays is their co-op days.
Okay.
So on Thursdays, they know they're going to get all that extracurricular activity, or they're going to go to the science lab, or they're going to go to the museum. A lot of museums have science labs and classrooms, and that's where a lot of the co-ops also take place. Once you get that schedule down, you can balance your structure with flexibility. You can incorporate experimental learning, and you can manage multiple age groups if you have,
Yeah.
multiple children in the home.
Would you say, from your experience of working families, right? Because you're talking about like, oh, Thursdays are co-op days and things like that. Would you say that it's more beneficial to create a schedule where every day is a little bit different, or is it better to have a schedule that's exactly the same every single day so that there's no deviation?
It really depends on the student and what the
student.
student's willing to tolerate. So at that point, I'm looking for the parents to give me that information. Some parents will come out and say, we need consistency, we need routine, because if we don't, we'll start to see task avoidance behaviors. Again, this is another plus side to homeschooling, is you get to have those robust conversations with the parents to see what is most beneficial for the child, where in a traditional school setting, you really don't have that.
You don't get upset.
This is your schedule and this is your homeroom. Get in and get out. But there are challenges.
Well, I can imagine with anything that there would be.
It could be very demanding and overwhelming for parents, which is why a lot of parents go through the hybrid program, because it gives them an opportunity for not only their child to engage in extracurricular activities or co-ops or groups, but it gives the parents a break.
Yeah.
It gives them a prep break, so to speak.
Time.
No, I do understand. And I will say that this is a hot-bedded conversation that I have with many parents when we talk about education options and we talk about homeschooling. Some parents work all day. Some parents have 2 or 3 jobs. So what do you do as a parent who has that, but yet you still want that homeschooling experience?
Yeah.
My suggestion, and many of the path that some of the parents have taken, was start off with hybrid. Start small. Go big. If you start big and you decorate your room and you're like, I'm going to have a classroom and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, that's when you start to have anxiety. That's when you start to be overwhelmed. And then you're still thinking about your job and your other things that you have to be. A lot of my homeschooling parents are single parents, right? So again, scheduling is very important. And, we need to support the parents, coach the parents. And again, this is another plus with those supporting homeschooling groups on social media. There's so many different ideas, and it's a safe place for parents to vent from. Right. So some people may have questions regarding family decisions to homeschool, or they want to discuss strategies and share strategies. And just focus on positive outcomes, you know what I mean? Look at the longer picture. Why are you doing this, right?
Big picture plan.
Yeah. Another challenge that some parents might see in homeschooling is ensuring the academic rigor. But again, if you start with a hybrid, you'll get that coaching.
Yeah, because
with right,
what's
and
happening
then
in school.
you
versus
can just sail on your way. You can always change your program. If you start hybrid and you're like, I really need to just do this 100%, I thought about it, I prayed about it, and I think this is going to work for my family, then you have that experience. You started small and you went big. The question regarding transitioning into college, much like what we said before, you got to do your research.
Yeah.
In the beginning of your child's senior year, this is what I do with all my
maybe
seniors.
even a little sooner. The sooner
Right.
the better, honestly.
Well, in the beginning of my senior year, now most of my students, I will say, want to go to BYU. So they're staying in state. So when you stay in state in the state of Utah, they understand there's a lot of flexibility regarding having our incoming freshmen be homeschooling. But
Yeah.
then again, there's that flexibility in every university. You just have to find out what the university's requirements are, right? And do it before, because if you have to take a standardized test in April and May, you're ready to do so with prep from September.
Yeah.
Because that is another beauty about homeschooling, right? We can teach to the test, but we're teaching more to prep for the test, right? Rather than just taking away academic instruction just for standardized test.
Here's a list of SAT words that you need to memorize now.
Yeah. With all the overcoming all these challenges, there are success stories. I do want to share one success story.
Yeah. So obviously, like Liz has said multiple times, she does do this homeschooling thing quite a lot with her kids in Utah. So she's very familiar with the whole process, and she's a great resource. If you also plug the business here, if you also have some questions, feel free to hit Liz up at the work number. She'll happily walk you through how to get your kid into this homeschool state, whether hybrid or full in. But Liz had some opportunity to talk to some of her parents about it, just so you guys, can hear it from not just us about like what works and what doesn't work, but you have actual like tangible real life experience and hear about it.
Yeah. I mean, and the success, I can only speak from my experience with my students. I've received more praise, not verbal praise, but just seeing how my students, I have a student who hated math, couldn't do math whatsoever. Had to start on an algebra program. You're a senior. We got to do algebra. And so now the kid is whizzing through all my algebra programs, as you can see in the back, just flying right through it. And it's because, and it's really because of the opportunity with homeschooling. He was in a traditional school setting, just wasn't working out for him. Very overwhelmed, very high stress environment for him. And that's not the case for everybody, but for him in particular, it was the case. And so last year I started with him and his sister progressed beautifully and went back into traditional schooling, where he decided, I need to keep you because you're the only person that can reach me. Yeah.
I feel like I think I was here one day while you were working with him and you asked him what he liked better and he was like, oh, this, absolutely this.
Yeah. And we go on his own pace, right? Why am I teaching something if I got to move on and you don't even have an understanding of what we do? Right. So I give that to show you an example of what the pacing could look like. What does academic instructions look like? Why does it look like that? It doesn't look like that for everybody. I have students that are like, we got to be done in 25 minutes. I got to do this. I got to do that. And I'm good with that. You only have to tell me one time. Right. So you go with the flow. And unfortunately, in traditional schooling, that's not set very often. You can't go with the flow.
No, it's very much that hustle.
You go with the administration flow if they start to change.
The bell rang,
things.
let's go, turn in your work, let's go. It's very high paced. And that also, like, even as a grown adult, like that creates a pit of stress and anxiety of like, oh, I got to make sure this is done.
Sure. So imagine how it feels
for a kid.
And there's no rush. No. There's no rush at all with homeschooling.
No.
I don't know if I made you a believer in there, but I wanted to show, the effectiveness examples with students. It's just unreal. I
mean, I see the practicalities of it, right? I think right now, like if I were to ever, it'd be when my child's much, much older. Because I think right now it wouldn't be the best for
Yeah,
her.
I will say for the younger kids in elementary or so forth, yes, you
Yeah.
do need a parent around. There needs to be somebody in the home.
Yeah.
That you work out within your family dynamic with the scheduling because you already when that child has to log in.
Yeah.
Now, I'm only talking about when I give my examples, I'm talking about homeschooling remotely. I'm not talking about homeschooling where it's just the parent and the child,
Yeah.
right? We know a lot of people that do excellent jobs. Some of these parents should just be educators.
Wouldn't that be lovely? Wouldn't that be so nice? I do have a caveat question though. Can you do homeschooling and have a private instructor come in?
Yes, you can.
Oh, we love that.
Yes, you can. And that's what our business does as well.
Of course.
Yes, you
That's why I
can.
asked that question.
Now they can go into the home. Of course, that would have to be in New Jersey. And typically in New Jersey,
Yeah.
there are third-party companies that will look for that particular person. If you don't have your own
Yeah.
LLC, then yes, you still would be considered a consultant.
Yeah.
So when you work with homeschooling students, you are considered a consultant. So it is probably best that you do go ahead and get an LLC so that you can have all of your documentations lined up in a row, because when you become a consultant, you pay taxes at the end of the year.
Yep. I love a good tax. Ooh, actually, isn't today? We're filming on tax day. So if you haven't gotten your taxes done, I'm going to hope by the time this is uploaded that you did get your taxes done.
Yes.
So,
And so there are a lot of resources and curriculums for homeschooling, a lot of online curriculums. You can even just ChatGPT or Google homeschooling curriculums, because there are curriculums that are particularly geared for homeschooling. There are a lot of interactive videos and things that you can do with technology.
I love a good tech on this side of the room.
Right. And again, I'm going to preference by saying it's got to be state by state.
Yeah.
So if there is certain requirements or qualifications for a particular type of curriculum because the state just has a contract with this company or so forth, then you have to use that curriculum.
Yeah.
But for some states, for the majority of the states, it's really up to the professional to decide if you're in a hybrid program or if you're in a remote learning homeschooling setting.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's giving you an option of something to think about. A lot of parents, the reason why we did this particular topic is because of the evolution of education and the potential of education really looking different for traditional schooling, right?
Yeah.
So we wanted to bring an option to you regarding homeschooling and what that looks like and what can it potentially look like, right?
Yeah.
It looks different for every family, I will say.
And yes, I don't think it would look cookie cutter like the same for any family, because every family's dynamics a little different and needs are a little different, right?
Yeah. And when speaking with families of homeschooling, they are tapped into what's going on right now with the Department of Education. If they're receiving scholarship funding from the state or from a particular nonprofit organization, you have to be tapped in and you have to educate yourself with what's going on, because budgets are going to change. Yeah. Numbers are going to change. And so
you can't be completely oblivious to what's happening. Like, you have to be kind of dialed in, paying attention to the news, like keeping track. Use that website that Liz and I showed that will be linked in the description box, to track what's happening in your state, because it's going to be more important, I think, now more than ever, considering all the financial changes that are happening with education.
Yeah. Yeah. On top of everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. But parents are, I will say, for the most part, they're not overwhelmed. Well,
that's good.
You just need to go in and have a plan and stick with the plan. And any way their child can get educated, they're going to modify their schedules in order to do that, and appropriately. If you are seriously considering homeschooling, those are some of your, do your list, your pros and cons. Just like with any other major decision, you need to go through it and see if it's going to be conducive for your family.
Yeah.
And other than that, I mean, I just really wanted to scratch the surface with homeschooling. I do know once we start to see more of a change in the upper echelon of education.
SAT right there.
See? yeah, you need to be tapped in. And if it's something that you're seriously considering, again, just like Andrea has stated previously, call us. Let us know. We can navigate through this together. I've done it with my families, my families who have been in homeschooling for years, and my families who have been in homeschooling for a couple of months. We've sat down and navigated together to see what it looks like, especially if they're receiving some type of funding for their child's education. Did I make you a believer?
A little bit, yeah. Like I
Okay.
said,
As much as you did for me in technology.
did I make you? Did I make?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
utilizing use. I'm able to
She
implement some
is.
stuff.
I will say she started using
It's a,
AI
s-
stuff more.
it's
I
a
will say.
slow progress. Nevertheless, it's a progress.
Nonetheless, we will be in the future as another. I love a good shameless plug. You give me so many opportunities for a good shameless plug. We will in the future be offering some training courses that I will be leading that deal with AI and education and how to utilize that. We'll let you guys know when it's all completely finalized and good to launch. Give me a little time to make it pretty because I gotta make it pretty. And there's so many things that we could talk about. So it's probably going to be a multi-part training PD. But if it is, Jesus Christ, if it is something that you're interested in, feel free to reach out to us. I will happily send you all the details once it is fully launched. I think it's going to be really fun, and I think it'll definitely help a lot of educators, even families. Oh, if you're a homeschooling parent, a lot of families to actually utilize these resources for themselves and for their students.
What's on the next podcast?
Hey, I'm excited for this one.
Me
Actually.
too. Me
You know
too.
why? Because it hits home.
It does hit
It
home.
hits home real hard. So our next episode is all going to be about new careers for teachers and also teacher burnout, because we know what's happening with everything right now. Some of us might be a little worried about our jobs.
But I will say,
It's a little-
exciting news. There are so many avenues that teachers can go to work in.
Yeah, don't give it all away now, though. We do that
No,
sometimes.
I
We go on tiny tangents at the end
is
about the next
this
episode.
is an exciting topic. So
Oh, definitely. Just because I think on both fronts, we've been in both buckets at some point. Like, I definitely will say this year has definitely been, I think, my burnout year more so than ever working. Like, this definitely pushed me to the edge of what,
sure.
And had me really reassessing and rethinking about like what I wanted
And then
from
like
this
reeling you
yeah,
in this.
This reeled me right back in. She's like, don't you even think about it. Get your ass right back. So we are definitely looking forward to having that conversation with you guys in our next podcast. We would also really, 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 really love if we can get more of you guys involved in some capacity for this. Thinking about our episode on AI, I said ChatGPT, like that was the whole AI. Like we did get some people to like write in or tell us their thoughts. We really want to get you guys involved more so. So feel free if you're interested in physically being on the podcast, let us know. We will adjust our schedules to make sure that you have time to get on.
We'll make room for you.
We'll squeeze another chair in right here. Or, if you can't, squeeze at the tiny desk with Liz and I, we'll just phone you in, phone a friend on the call. Or if you want to just share your own personal story with us via a message, a text, Instagram, Facebook. Let me do my screen share real quick. Where's my window? Sometimes I'm fast with all this stuff, and then sometimes I'm oddly slow. So you can message us.
Thank you.
Thanks. You can message us on our Instagram page. And if you don't follow us, please go ahead and click that follow button because we love that.
Follow.
You can also send us a message on our Facebook page if you're a Facebook person. Our phone number if you want to text us, or even if you call us and you don't get us, you can leave us a voicemail too. We'll happily play it on air while we're recording. Our number is 973-348-5237. See, I figured it out after my last fumble last time. You can also feel free to message us on our website, which is Unique Learners.
And if you have or want to hear any topics, or if you have suggestions, go ahead, because there are a lot of different ideas, suggestions, and even just if you want to have a venting session.
Yeah, we're down.
Educators need venting sessions.
110% down for a venting session. I'm always down for a venting session. I don't even need to know you. Just hit me up. I'll say less. Say less. I will happily. Tell me more. What's the tea? What's
teachers always love their
The kids taught me that, and I think that was the worst thing they could have ever taught me, because then I just walked around for a good week going like, "Ooh, clock that tea." They're like, "Miss Russo, clock that tea." So feel free, hit me up. I'll sit and have that tea sesh with you. Okay.
But we do want to thank you for joining in today. And we do hope that you take some information and share this information with anybody who has any questions regarding any of the topics that we had today. And as always, we are doing our part to stay engaged, ask questions, and stay active.
We'll see you in the next one. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.